All right, let's just jump right into this. Today, we're going on a pretty fascinating mission for this explainer. We're going to dig into the deep evolutionary roots of human cooperation and human conflict by looking really closely at the biology and behavior that define us, and we're going to be drawing heavily on some groundbreaking work here, like David Buss's Evolutionary Psychology, Robert Sapolsky's Behave, and Richard Wrangham's The Goodness Paradox. Our goal is to build a deeper and honestly a highly actionable awareness of our own fundamental nature. So, if you've ever found yourself wondering why we act the way we do, well, you are definitely in the right place. Here's our quick roadmap for today. 1. The mission of our nature. 2. The paradox of human behavior. 3. The biology behind the action. 4. Evolution of cooperation. 5. The self-domestication hypothesis. And finally, 6. From biology to empathy. Okay, kicking things off with part 1, the mission of our nature. So here's a thought to get us started. If we actually evolved to be good, why on earth can we also be so incredibly vile? This question perfectly frames biological anthropologist Richard Wrangham's concept of the goodness paradox. It really challenges us to wrap our heads around a profound mystery. How can we be simultaneously the absolute most compassionate species on the planet and yet capable of such extraordinarily organized cruelty? It's a massive contradiction, and it definitely demands a scientific answer. Which brings us right to part 2, the paradox of human behavior. Look at it this way. On one hand, humans display this immense, almost unprecedented capacity for everyday tolerance. I mean, think about it. We wait patiently in lines, we blindly trust total strangers to prepare the food we eat, and we manage to cooperate in cities packed with millions of people. Yet, on the flip side, we have this completely unique propensity for proactive, calculated violence and warfare. We are literally a species capable of breathtaking altruism and organized cruelty, sometimes on the exact same day. Drawing from the work of psychologist Jordan Peterson, we really have to acknowledge this incredibly unsettling truth. Unlike other animals, who mostly kill out of immediate necessity, for food or self-defense, humans can inflict suffering just for the sake of it. It highlights a really dark uniqueness in our consciousness. We don't just act on random impulse. We can sit down, strategize, and actually plan to do harm. Let's move on to section 3, the biology behind the action. If we want to understand literally any human behavior, we've got to borrow neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky's brilliant zoom-out technique. You can't just look at the exact moment an action happens. It doesn't work like that. We have to trace the behavior backwards. First, you look at the firing neuron the single second before. Then you zoom out to the days before, looking at how hormone exposure, things like testosterone or oxytocin, actually primed that brain. And finally, you have to zoom all the way out to millennia before to see the ancient evolutionary pressures that sculpted that specific nervous system in the first place. A perfectly visceral example of this is the classic neurobiology case of Phineas Gage. Gage famously survived an explosion that drove a massive iron rod straight through his frontal cortex. And sure, while he survived physically, his personality was completely wiped out and replaced. Physical damage to the frontal cortex completely alters our social behavior, our capacity for empathy, and our ability to do the harder right thing. It's absolute proof that our morality is deeply, inextricably tied to our physical biological hardware. But, okay, here is where the plot really thickens. While our frontal cortex does a great job helping us suppress immediate impulsive violence, which scientists call reactive aggression, humans somehow evolved to uniquely excel at something called proactive aggression. This is calculated, planned, coalitionary violence against outgroups. Simply put, it's warfare. And the crazy part? It requires the exact same advanced frontal cortex that suppresses our impulses in the first place. All right, that leads us right into section 4, evolution of cooperation. David Buss's landmark work in evolutionary psychology reminds us of a really fundamental rule here. Our modern minds, including our immense capacity for intense sociality and cooperation, were forged by ancient evolutionary environments and harsh survival necessities. We didn't learn to cooperate because we suddenly decided it was a nice, polite idea. No, we learned to cooperate because it was literally the only way our ancestors could survive. We actually managed to overcome our inherently selfish genetic tendencies through this brilliant mechanism called reciprocal altruism. This is the bedrock biological foundation that explains exactly how non-relatives can build complex societies together. Think of it as the ultimate "I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, but I am definitely watching to make sure you actually do it" principle. It requires immense cognitive power to track who owes who is a cheat, and who is a reliable long-term partner. And this brings us to Robin Dunbar's famous hypothesis, which links neocortex size directly to group size across all primates. our human neocortex expanded specifically to handle the immense, frankly exhausting cognitive load of navigating large human social groups. Dunbar projects that our brains are basically hardwired to comfortably manage networks of around 150 people. Any more than that, and our ancient hardware kind of starts glitching out.
Which perfectly sets up Part 5, the self-domestication hypothesis. So he might be wondering, how did we become tolerant enough to live in large groups of 150 people in the first place, without the biggest, most aggressive alphas just tearing everyone apart? Well, Richard Wrangham's incredible self-domestication hypothesis offers a really wild answer. Millions of years ago, our ancestors had extremely high reactive, impulsive aggression. But around 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens developed complex language. This basically allowed the weaker beta males to secretly gossip, conspire, and form coalitions to execute those violently dominant alpha despots. By literally killing off the most impulsively violent individuals over roughly 12,000 generations, we bred impulsive aggression right out of our own species. We, quite literally, domesticated ourselves.
So the crucial takeaway here is the supreme irony of human evolution. Our capacity for calculated, proactive violence, our ability to secretly gang up and execute tyrants, is exactly the evolutionary mechanism that created our peaceful, cooperative, and egalitarian nature. It's wild, right? We became good because we got really, really good at organizing deadly violence against bullies. But make no mistake, that same neural machinery is exactly what we use to wage coordinated war against other groups today. Let's wrap things up with Section 6, from biology to empathy. So what's the so what here? How does understanding all these ancient biological realities actually help us navigate modern everyday social interactions? Well, the single most empowering takeaway from all this science is this. Our biology is not rigidly determined. It is incredibly malleable. Because of neuroplasticity, our brains are constantly, actively rewiring themselves based on our experiences, our environments, and our cultures. We are absolutely not just hostages to our evolutionary past. But to actually use that neuroplasticity, we have to recognize our biological pitfalls. Our brains, and specifically the amygdala, instantly categorize people into us versus them, in literal fractions of a second. Hormones like oxytocin make us incredibly trusting and intensely empathetic to the us group. But, and here's the kicker, that exact same hormone can make us heavily xenophobic and preemptively aggressive to anyone in the them group. These are deeply ingrained, completely arbitrary biases built right into our hardware. So what do we do about it? By actively acknowledging these unconscious biological triggers, we can intentionally use our frontal cortex to hit the brakes and override them. When you feel that sudden flash of us versus them judgment, you can consciously step in, reframe those entirely arbitrary boundaries, and intentionally expand your circle of empathy to include those who fall outside your immediate natural tribe. Think of empathy as a literal biological muscle. You absolutely have to flex it for it to work. As Robert Sapolsky so beautifully notes, the exact same biological machinery that allows for our greatest cruelties and our absolute darkest tribalism is the exact same machinery that gives us the capacity for our finest, most compassionate, and most breathtakingly cooperative moments. Biology isn't an excuse, guys, it's just the toolkit. As we bring this explainer to a close, I want to leave you with a real challenge. The next time you interact with someone, especially someone you strongly disagree with, are you going to see them as just some random entity? Or will you choose to see them as a deeply complex web of evolutionary biology entirely shaped by millennia of history, fluctuating hormones, and intricate neurology, a web that you now actually have the power to understand and empathize with? Take this science and transform it into your own everyday emotional intelligence. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.